So this video is for BTEC Sport and Exercise Sciences Unit 11 Sports Massage and focuses on A1 Industry Standards of Practice. So I guess it's important perhaps initially to consider why have standards of practice? Why as a sports massage therapist or practitioner do you need guidance on how to conduct your practice? And that probably starts with what could go wrong? What are the what ifs if something went wrong during your practice? And the what ifs could relate to or result in you losing your job or your business, being fined, legal action against you, ruining your reputation and ultimately causing some harm. So it's essential that there is some clarity in what are the basic expectations of standards and quality and how you conduct your practice. So the sports massage industry has fairly strict standards of practice so that all treatments carried out are safe and hygienic, are in safe and hygienic environments, and that there's clarity on the consequences to professionals or therapists if you don't comply with these standards. There are professional and legal consequences, and so it all has to be complied with. Here's the specification content, so please pause the video and have a look through that. Hopefully you'll be able to recognise aspects of this. Some of this is absolutely common sense, some of this is legal requirement, but really important to incorporate all into your assessment. So I'm going to work through all of this content, not that I'm going to go into absolute detail about everything, but will give you a sense of what it means. Please just make note that you need to understand the relevance and the importance of these industry standards of practice in the context of a practitioner working in a variety of different environments. Now, we've already looked at the different environments or situations or contexts a practitioner might be giving treatment in, and some of these standards of practice might come into question in some of those environments. Some of them they're very evident, some of them they might be contentious. So this would be where you will show your ability to analyse and discuss using these or abiding by these standards of practice in those different situations. Let's say a clinical setting in a hospital versus pitch side. So I'm going to go through each of those sections fairly swiftly, trying to give you a sense of them. It will require detailed research from you to give detail in your assessment of them. In terms of health and safety, there are several, as you can see, about 7 different potential aspects you could look at, and I suggest that you give a sense of a variety of these in detail rather than all in detail in your work. So we've got health and safety at work legislation, so the Act. We've got management of safety at work. We've got employers' liability and compulsory insurance, so insurances. We've got first aid regulations, RIDA, manual handling operations. Obviously, by nature, massage is a physical thing and you've got equipment you might need to handle, and Data Protection Act. You're going to be having sensitive information about your clients. So let's go through these one by one. So the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 applies to employers and employees. It relates to, it's a law, so it is essential that it's complied with, whether you're working within a big organisation or a small private organisation. It's about keeping you, your employees, your employers, and any customers safe. So you will have a legal duty of care to make sure that this health and safety is complied with so that everybody is safe in the workplace. These are some basics of what it requires. So you've got to have a safe environment, no hazards. You've got to have a health and safety policy. You've got to assess risk, do a risk assessment. You've got to record all the findings of your risk assessment and keep up to date data and information and documentation. You've got to consult with all your employees to ensure that they understand the processes and the requirements of them to keep them and their clients safe. You've got to have health and safety information and training and supervision for all employees, and you've got to keep all records. So again, it's kind of common sense, but it is a legal requirement that's done within that Health and Safety Act. Next, we've got the Management of Safety at Work Regulations. So this is guidance and it's linked to the Health and Safety at Work Act. These are regulations that should be applied through work. It's primarily about keeping and revisiting and updating risk assessments. So it's about how you manage the safety. And one major way you manage safety at work is by conducting risk assessments of any possible hazards that might happen in the workplace, in the environment, or wherever it is. Remember, you might be at a away pitch or a home pitch or pit side, or in a clinic or in a hospital. So it's about having risk assessments that show that you've thought about the what if, what could go wrong, and you've done as much as possible to put control measures in place, you're aware of the potential hazards, and you've done the utmost to try and mediate those problems. So management of safety at work regulations is primarily about risk assessment management. So if you're an employer with 5 or more employees, you would need to record significant findings from risk assessments. So you as a therapist might work for an organisation that has more than 5 employees. You might be one of those, or you might be the employer of others, and you need to comply with these regulations. This is some specific guidance and expectation of the employers and of the employees. Obviously, take time, read through them properly. Again, some of it's pretty obvious and common sense. Things like, as an employee, you've got to know who the appointed health and safety representative is. You've got to know how to alert somebody if there are hazards. You've got to be able to not cause more harm by working within your skill capacity, by applying correct and safe techniques, by being professional, by checking your equipment regularly and checking if there are any faults, and not using or taking any risks yourself that put you or any others at risk. So this slide is probably just a bit more insightful for you. I'm really not going to pause on this at all, so you can have a little look through this. This just tries to give a little bit of comparison between being self-employed or a sole trader versus being an employee associated with a bigger organisation. Just have a little look through that information for your own insight, really. Okay, so we've got the Employers' Liability Act 1968. Again, do your own your own research, take time to look at this in more detail, but primarily this is a requirement of employers to have appropriate insurance to protect employees, just in case injury occurs at work and there may need to be a claim for compensation. So it is a requirement that the employers have liability insurance to protect, to ultimately protect themselves, to be fair, but to protect employees should they come to any harm whilst working. First aid provision at work. Obviously, this is essential. It's associated with updated CPD training for first aid. I don't know if you remember, but several job adverts require sports massage therapists to have a first aid qualification that's current, but your organisation or your employers might provide ongoing recaps each year, or certainly every 3 years, which is often when the qualifications expire. It's to do with knowing who your first aiders are, having good appropriate signage to where to find them or how to get to hold of them, and where to find the medical treatment box provision, and obviously making sure that what you have in your first aid box is current, safe, up-to-date, appropriate. So the first aid provision at work is clearly related to do you know what to do? Where do you find extra help? Where do you get first aid box and treatment? And here's a little bit of information about that first aid at work. It is a regulation. It is under that umbrella of the Health and Safety at Work Act, and it does, again, require things from employees and the employers. It's obviously relevant in the last few years to be mindful of restrictions, varying levels of restriction based on COVID-19 in order to protect yourself very much so, but also protect all of your clients and those that you work with. So in your assessment, it's absolutely worth acknowledging this in terms of risk assessment, in terms of first aid, in terms of standards of practice wherever you might be practicing massage. Then we move on to RIDA, which is an abbreviated version of reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrences regulations. So again, this is under health and safety as a big umbrella, one of the different aspects. And this is again a legal requirement which is related to the health and safety executive. They are the main organisation who you would have to report to or who would investigate you should anything serious happen. So if by any chance, I'm trying to think of how this would happen as a massage therapist, but if, for example, you weren't manual handling a client correctly, they fell off the couch and broke, a bone, it would probably need to be reported to RIDA. It's part of the regulations of RIDA to report to the health and safety executive. They may or may not investigate it, but you need to inform them of something that happens. If multiple people do this, they would definitely be checking out, well, what's going wrong with this and why is this happening? So this is a method of reporting any occurrences of injuries or more severe conditions to the health and safety executive so that they can monitor provision of safety and potential negligence. Manual handling operations regulations. So it's essential that you as a practitioner know how to lift your equipment, to work with clients safely such that you A, don't damage yourself and B, don't damage them. It's as simple as things like lifting techniques, but it's broader than that. It's how to, sort out your couch. If it's a mobile couch you're taking somewhere safely, it's probably, the mechanics of your standing position, because if you think about it, having to do treatments over many hours, bent over somebody potentially, can certainly damage you. So, manual handling operations regulations, fairly simple in terms of understanding what it is, but equally quite relevant to a practitioner, especially if they are somebody who's not based in a clinic, who might be more dynamic and mobile. So the last little subtopic of health and safety is data protection. Again, you may well be familiar with this with other aspects of sports science work, but essentially whatever data you have on your clients must by law be protected, mustn't be disclosed without their consent, their permission, should be in a secured, if it's digital, password protected, locked cupboard if it's not, locked cabinet if it's not, place where it is safe and not available to anybody else. Again, there's lots of detail that you can search. Data protection is a huge thing, became massive a couple of years ago with leaks of people's data, and that's why we had all the GDPR, where you had to be informed by the organisation what they were doing to protect your data. So please do some research about the legal requirements, what's required of you as a professional in order to protect your client's data. So there's a little summary of the various aspects of health and safety that we've gone through fairly briefly, but again, it's just to give you a sense of things. You need to do more detailed research on the ones that you're going to analyse and evaluate in detail. Moving on then, safeguarding. So we kind of need to know what is safeguarding. We need to know about policies. You as an organisation or professional would need to have read and understood the safeguarding policy of the organisation. You've got to make sure that you abide by the guidance and the expectation of it, and can recognise perhaps and be aware of potential abuse of that you might see or hear or sense of clients. We need to look a little bit at child protection and the potential need for a chaperone. So safeguarding is any action that's taken to promote the welfare of children and protect them from harm. So it is everybody's responsibility. It's the receptionist if you work in a clinic, it's yours, it's the employers, it's everybody's role, and therefore it's essential that everybody understands what it means and how to optimally administer it, I guess. So we want to protect children from abuse and maltreatment, prevent harm, ensure they grow up in safe and effective care, and take action to make sure that no harm comes to them and they have the best outcomes. And you, especially in a situation where you may be not only relatively close contact working on them, you will possibly see and listen to them and recognise changes in their behaviour which may be indicative of abuse. So it's essential that you understand your responsibility. If you are working with clients under 16 or vulnerable adults, then you must have a presence of a parent or guardian or a chaperone. It's basically important that you have consent, you have other people there to protect yourself actually as much as protecting the young person or the vulnerable adult. So a vulnerable adult is essentially anyone who is unable to care or protect for themselves in situations that may cause them harm or exploitation. So either way, it's really important that it is overt, that it is transparent, that you have others present. Every sports organisation, so your sports clubs must have a safeguarding policy. So have a look at them. And of course, you as a massage therapist working with a club or working in an organisation must know where to get it and have understood the organisation's safeguarding policy. There's just a bit more clarity on what is meant by a vulnerable adult. Chaperoning then. So should for any reason a parent or guardian not be available, let's say it's at the club or it's training and a young person or vulnerable adult needs treatment, it's important that somebody else is present with consent from the parent or guardian, but this person will act as a chaperone, i.e. somebody else to witness what goes on within that treatment and to be sure that both parties are protected, you and the young person are protected. You can imagine that it's essential given the context of physical, hands-on, treatments on skin, potentially where clothing is removed and there's relative exposure, where this sort of protection for you and both parties is absolutely essential. So again, some general things that can be put in place to make sure safeguarding is effective. DBS checks goes without saying. I'm sure even some of your jobs, if you're coaches, you may have a DBS check, you may have been DBS checked. This would be essential part of the job application process anyway, wherever you were doing your treatments. Updated training on safeguarding. Raising awareness, making sure all policies and information is updated and signposted so it's easily accessible. As I said, training to make sure that you as a professional know what to look out for. The more familiar you are with the young people, the more you might recognise perhaps a change in their behaviour if they've become withdrawn, if there are marks on them that might be indicative of something that aren't typically what you might find. Even in sport, we often get a bit battered and bruised, but you can recognise potential signs that something may be astray. And training to do that and to how to respond and who to notify is absolutely essential in the context of this. So these are some other bits of legislation that feeds into the safeguarding legislation. Obviously the Children's Act, Protection of Children Act and so on. You aren't expected to know everything about all of these in any shape or form. It's just context really that this informs safeguarding. Child protection refers to anybody under the age of 18 and vulnerable adults. So this is kind of what will be done, what needs to be done to protect children who have been identified as being at risk or in need of support. It could be that you're working with a club and a child in the club is known to have been abused in some shape or form, and this would apply to how you work with them and with the relevant adults or supervisors or guardians or chaperones to make sure that they are protected. A child can give assent for treatment. That means they can say, yeah, that's fine, but the adult will also need to give their consent. It's not enough for the child to say, yep, it's fine by me. It's got to have an adult's consent, an appropriate adult's consent as well. So child protection is kind of a subsection of safeguarding. There we are. So the subtopics on safeguarding are child protection, legislation and vulnerable adults, safeguarding, chaperoning. Next we have a bit on insurance policies. Now these were mentioned in terms of some of the other health and safety legislations, but there are a couple that you should have an understanding of. So insurances are basically contractual documents between the insurance company and the policyholder. The policyholder might be the organisation you work for, it might be you. It's a legally binding document, an agreement that clarifies what will happen if and whether claims will be paid or not if a claim is made. They are normally quite specifically designed, so if you're a sports massage therapist, there would be a specific policy that relates to you and the treatment and the circumstance you're in. Now, as a therapist, you would need both public liability and professional indemnity insurance to make sure that you're covered if somebody makes a claim against you should anything happen. So there's a couple, those two are requirements really for you to have as a professional. The consequence could be if there is any risk of malpractice. Let's say you did something that you shouldn't have or treated somebody that actually you probably shouldn't have and made their injury worse or caused harm, you would be considered negligent. You haven't given them the care that was required. You may effectively have broken the law and they may claim against you, which obviously has all sorts of consequences to you. So malpractice, may be an example of negligent behaviour in the profession. So here's one of the ones that should be in place. Public liability insurance. Again, I'm not going to read everything. This is here for you to get a sense of it. So if somebody makes a claim, then this is there to protect you. If somebody's injured and you are responsible, this hopefully will mean that it will cover the compensation, any loss of earnings of the client, any future loss of earnings, any legal costs for you and them. So it's an absolutely essential one to protect all parties really, but certainly so that you're not paying out of your pocket should there be any harm caused whilst in theory in your care. Professional indemnity insurance is also called professional liability insurance. So particularly if you're self-employed, this is really important to protect you. If you inadvertently are liable, cause any kind of harm, or it says over here, reasons for indemnity insurance, if documents are lost or leaked, or there's a breach of confidentiality, or you, let's say, are talking about somebody and it damages their reputation and that you get caught, this insurance in theory covers any legal costs or expenses or damages incurred. So again, a very, very important one to protect you as a professional. Malpractice insurance, this one isn't listed on your spec, but I've just popped a little bit of information here. It kind of underpins what the other two insurances are related to, and as it says here, professional indemnity and public liability insurance are essential should somebody claim against you. What would be also important is that the premium, the insurance covers quite a vast amount of money. Should you accidentally misdiagnose or mistreat somebody, as in treat them in a way that actually causes them harm, it could be quite a large sum of money. So it's important that you do take it out, even though premiums can be reasonably high. It is such an important thing to protect you in your workplace. So there we have it, professional indemnity, public liability, and understanding what malpractice is, doing something that's wrong or inappropriate or causes somebody else harm. So next little subtopic in the professional standard practice is things like making sure your equipment is appropriate, safe, up to date as much as possible, in terms of being appropriate for you, so you're not going to cause yourself harm, but obviously secure and stable so that your client's not going to be harmed once using it. Obviously, certain couches, for example, may have a weight limit, or you might need extensions, or you might need, people are different sizes and shapes. You might need to account for that. You don't want to ask somebody to get themselves comfortable and then it can't cope with their weight. Make sure everything is in good working order. It's a pretty basic thing. But also it's things like, having a chair for yourself or them, towels to give them privacy and warmth, pillows, bolsters and couch rolls. So they are other things to help support the client when they're on the couch and to make them comfortable. And making sure that you have the right medium or that they're not allergic to it. And we'll look a little bit more at the mediums that you might use. And potentially you might be using other bits of equipment, remember. So a massage gun or taping or the suction cups, if you remember, could be. And making sure it's all in good working order and checking for allergies could be absolutely critical. So it's important for you, certainly within the later assignments, that you understand the different massage mediums. That means the stuff that you use and apply to your clients whilst giving treatments. There are different things that could be used. I would say broadly that sort of creams, lotions and waxes are probably more common. But here is a sort of an overview of it, which you can take time to look through yourself. I've tried to give a sense of some of the advantages and disadvantages. I know one therapist who uses waxes. It's not very messy. It goes a long way, spreads a long way without using much product. It's a bit more expensive to buy in itself, but downside is it's quite easily absorbed into the skin and, for certain types of massage. I know another practitioner who uses more cream, more lotion, which is cheaper to buy, but actually you have to keep reapplying and you're basically putting your hands in the tub and applying it to different bodies. You could question there's some hygiene issue there. And it might be a bit more kind of residue on the skin once the massage is finished that the client has to then deal with. Talc isn't used so much. Oils, I'd suggest, are probably less sports massage treatment, more holistic treatments, alternative treatments. But again, it's worth presenting in your work and recognizing and showing off that you understand there are different mediums and there are different pros and cons to them. So equipment, things to be mindful of, being professional, having high standards, there they are. Environment then, we've already addressed this to some degree, but these are the different spaces which you might find yourself working in. We've gone through this to some degree already. There are pros and cons, so again, just to quickly show you these, although they are in a different video, you can have a look yourself. Some basics though, whatever space, where possible, it may not be possible if it's pitch side, you want to try and make your client comfortable, having a comfortable temperature in the space, make it sure it's ventilated, clean and hygienic. It's obvious, might not work if it's in a changing room. Space for you to work around them if possible, comfortable lighting, not distracting noise. Privacy needs to be respected as much as possible wherever you are. You can certainly discuss the pros and cons of different environments in terms of that. And you need to know wherever you're treating where the nearest first aid is or phone is if you needed support and guidance from anybody else. So knowing that you might be working in an away venue or in a public space or at somebody's home or in a leisure centre, you need to know what the emergency protocols and procedures are, because you might need to not only look after yourself, but you might need to look after your client and guide them too. So wherever you are, make sure you know what the emergency exit routes are, check the the fire alarms and evacuation meeting points. You should certainly inform your client if you're not expecting a fire drill in the sort of venue. Say we're not expecting one. If it happens, this is what we need to do. Therefore, and again, remember they are going to be probably laid on your couch, semi-clothed. So you will certainly need to help them to some degree get slightly more clothes before you help them leave the building. It might not be put all their clothes on, their shoes and socks on. It might just be something that maintain some level of dignity and privacy. But you've got to follow all the emergency and health and safety procedures in a calm and confident and professional way. Similarly, you should have your clients, in case of emergency contact information, regardless. Lastly, then, we've got to look at your conduct yourself. So in terms of professional standards, what you should wear, what you should be like, how you should be in terms of your character. And this may vary hugely. So some therapists will wear, whites, very clinical, very clean, particularly if it's in a clinic. Others will wear like a polo shirt or a t-shirt, slightly more casual, but still you need to be professional. Whatever it is, you still need to be professional in terms of your clothing. In terms of you, things like nails. So you shouldn't have long nails anyway as a therapist, but they should certainly have clean hands, clean nails. You are trying to be professional. You're trying to promote hygiene. Your client is vulnerable and it's your responsibility to protect them in every sensible way like that, even things like deodorant. Behavior yourself, positive, open attitude, encouraging, supportive, understanding, be respectful of your client. They may be really nervous, they may be worried about it, they may not have had a treatment before. Respect what they tell you, explain to them and communicate with them in an appropriate level. So you don't necessarily want to give them loads of technical jargon. You might have to simplify things for them or give them more technical knowledge if they understand it and want to know it. Things like tying your hair back if you've got long hair. So I think the conduct of the therapist in terms of how you dress, how you physically are professionally, and how you communicate and behave with your client, a lot of common sense there that you can discuss. The consequences of not being like that are huge to your business, to your client's experience, to your reputation, and the chances of them ever coming back to you. Lastly then, code of conduct. So we're talking about professional conduct of the therapist. A lot of the organisations, associations that we've talked about and you need to know, will give a code of conduct which kind of states what you should be like, what is expected of you working within this profession. It indicates the boundaries where you should limit your treatments or what you offer your clients. It gives you guidance on what to expect with clients, how to be mindful of them and their own anxieties. Remember, it's a very intimate thing doing a treatment. It might advise you on how to support them or make them more comfortable. So codes of conduct and finding a code of conduct maybe to have a look at could be a really good thing. So there's obviously a list of bits and bobs here. These are headings really that this SST organisation provides, but it gives you a sense of the sort of thing we mean. So the therapist conduct actually covers these aspects, again, from the specification.